So I had the opportunity to talk to Matt Brown, who has been basically the number one source for any information related to EA Sports college football. I got an opportunity to sit down and talk with him over the phone for about 50 minutes. So this is just going to be the unedited 50-minute interview with him. There's no video with it. It's just audio, so I'll be playing gameplay in the background. So feel free just to sit down, enjoy the 50-minute interview. I'll probably have more videos after this breaking it down, like shorter videos with clips from it, but this is just going to be the 50-minute interview. We talk about a ton of stuff related to the game, a lot of new information, a lot of information I didn't know was even out there, so definitely enjoy it. And like I said, it was a phone call, so the audio is a little weird, so just keep that in mind, but we really appreciate Matt Brown taking the time to talk with us, so enjoy. Hey Matt, this is Steven. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm doing awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and hopefully answer some questions for the upcoming game.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to hopefully have the chance to get some more accurate information out there. And
yeah,
I'd much rather talk about this than listen to another AD bitch about how hard their job is.
Right. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Fun. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. First, I'll just kind of introduce you. That way people, when I post this, and I'll probably put it on Instagram as well as YouTube, they'll know exactly who Matt Brown is. So you are the publisher of the newsletter Extra Points, which covers all of the off-the-field stuff that shapes college sports. You used to be a part of SB Nation. And then I actually just recently found out that you wrote a book called What If? A Closer Look at College Football's Greatest Questions. I believe that was in 2017. Actually, now that I know that, I'm planning on copping that and giving it a read. I don't really read, but if it's about college football, I'll definitely give it a read. So, then
thanks. I hope you like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then most importantly for a time now, I would say you are the number one source for information regarding EA Sports college football. So does all that sound accurate and good?
Yeah, all that sounds great.
Perfect. So I guess just hopping right into it, I guess could you first explain how you are getting the information you are getting for the upcoming game? I know you kind of did your journalistic research to get those things. So if you could just explain how you're getting the information you are, that would be awesome.
Sure. So I'm getting it primarily through two different ways. One is through something called open records requests. Most universities and FBS are public schools, which means that anybody can file what's called an open records request and inspect certain kinds of university documents. That includes things like contracts, emails between university employees, and in this case, that would include conversations with universities and either EA Sports or CLC, which is the major licensing company that EA Sports uses to get approval to use things like school names and stadiums and intellectual property. So through filing a lot of those requests, we get correspondence that those companies have sent schools about what they need to be in the game or how the game's development is going. By sharing those, and because I do a lot of other reporting on licensing and intellectual property in college sports generally, I also have developed relationships. So with people at EA on the development side and on the communication side, and with many of the larger companies that work as intermediaries within these kinds of projects, or from people that work in licensing on the school side. So it's not just me kind of republishing what I get from these emails, but I can get the emails and then now know enough people in the industry that I can call and ask for context or get clarification so I can understand how this whole project is working.
Gotcha. Okay, well, awesome, because I knew a lot of that, but so you actually have contacts within EA that's actually developing the game. You can actually talk to people personally through that.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's good to know. I hope that gives, I already knew you were the number one source for all these things, but hopefully for people listening, that gives you maybe a little more validity than thought before, but that's awesome. So I got some big questions here. You've probably reported on a lot of these already, but these are kind of the big questions that I know a lot of people have. And then afterwards, we can hop into maybe some of the more specific questions that my followers had. I put a thing on our Instagram story for them to ask questions, and there were hundreds. I tried to pick and choose ones that I saw come up a lot, but we'll just kind of rapid fire at that point. But I'll hit some of these big questions first, if that works for you.
Of course.
Awesome. So my first question, probably the most anticipated and most important one, is the release date. I know it's been reported a bunch, but if you could just kind of let us know what you know about the release date, that would be awesome.
Yeah, the game is currently scheduled to come out next summer. That's been the case since, I don't know, late last year, I think, or when the game was originally delayed. It was supposed to come out this summer. And then the company communicated to schools and had a story in ESPN. They're going to move it to the summer of 24 to make sure that the game itself is the best quality that they could possibly make it. I know there's been a lot of speculation that potential litigation between EA and a company called Brandar could slow down the development of the game, or that lawsuits could change things. EA has said multiple times in public that's where still all systems go. Everything I've heard from EA and from the schools and from the industry says the same thing. They're not projecting any other delays. Summer of 24 is the target right now.
Perfect. Yeah, I know when it first got delayed, people were upset, including myself.
Sure, I wanted to play it too.
Right, exactly. But I do think giving that extra year is huge. I feel like sometimes we're just greedy consumers that want it out as soon as possible, but all of us would be extremely disappointed if it came out this year and the game was complete trash. So I think the extra year is completely fine and acceptable. Going along with that, and you kind of just touched on it, but do you think there's any chance or any information you've received that would indicate this game could get delayed again?
That would really surprise me.
Okay.
And if hypothetically there was, it would be for reasons that have nothing to do with litigation.
Okay.
But EA is a publicly traded company. They understand that there is investor pressure and also outside pressure to get this thing done now. Anything is possible, right? But I have not heard anything to suggest that should be a concern.
Awesome. I hope that settles some people, because myself included, just without really hearing anything so far, it feels like from EA, I do get a little worried about those things. But hopefully, that kind of confirms summer 2024 is what we're looking at. Some of these other big time questions. What teams are going to be in this football game?
The expectation and plan right now is for every FBS institution that will be an FBS institution in 2024 will be in the game. As of this exact second, not every single one of them have, I think, signed the final licensing paperwork. There's a couple of stragglers left. Part of that was because some schools were holding out on signing everything until they knew what their players could be paid. That's going to happen. But I've had people at EA and people at COC tell me, hey, even these few schools that haven't signed the final form, they're still participating. They're still sending us audio assets. They're still sending us uniforms. They're still responding to the emails. It's just a little paperwork thing here. But that's the plan. So that would include Kennesaw State. That would include James Madison and Jacksonville State and Sam Houston and some of these newer teams. I have been repeatedly told that the plan is to not include FCS teams at launch. That isn't to say that they may not be included as a DLC or an expansion pack or something later on, but the plan for the last year plus has been to focus on FBS institutions.
Got it. Yeah, that's kind of what I've been hearing, and I've been telling people, because a lot of people ask me questions as if I'm really an authoritative source where I just basically report stuff from you and other people. But I've been telling people every FBS school should be in the game, and that's including the ones transitioning from the FCS to the FBS.
Yes.
But you said something that's really interesting there, that even the ones that haven't officially signed on, and I'm thinking maybe that includes like a Notre Dame, I'm not sure, but they are still sending assets to EA as if they're going to be in the game. Is that correct?
That is correct. So Notre Dame was one of the ones that I heard. Northwestern and Tulane were two other ones, all three private schools. I've been assured that they, while those other things are being worked out, they were still sending stuff. I know Ohio State was somebody who did not sign the paperwork at launch when it was first announced, and they had to work through some licensing issues on the IP side. That's done. Ohio State signed on to the game now, but Ohio State was still participating and sending stuff while they were waiting.
Gotcha.
Everybody knows that the potential recruiting penalty and the pushback from their athletes and from their fans would be so strong that there's virtually no paperwork issue that would prevent an FBS school from participating.
Okay, perfect. So I've actually even said that if I was a potential recruit, especially a big time recruit, and it came down to a couple schools for me, I'm not going to go to the school that isn't participating in the game. I think that people don't realize how big of a recruiting thing that would be, is if you're one of the few schools that aren't actually in the football game. So I think that's...
they'll all be in the game.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point you've brought up. And going along with that, so you already mentioned probably no FCS schools, maybe as an extension or something. I know I was going to ask that as well. People have been asking about FCS schools. But going along with all of that in the NIL and everything, what about real players? I know they're supposedly supposed to be in the game, but exactly, and you're probably a great source for this since you cover a lot of NIL things, what players are supposed to be in the game, how many, how do they get in the game, something like that.
Sure. So there's some nuance here. So there's maybe more information than you wanted, but I'll give you everything, okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So the plan, what EA wants to do is license every single scholarship football player that is on a roster and on scholarship for next season. So that's 85 people a team for 134 teams. That is what EA is hoping, even people at the very back end, which would be an increase, as I understand it, from previous games where rosters were smaller.
Right.
So they want to have all 85. The way that they're doing that is partnering with a company right now called One Team Partners, who administers the group license for the Madden franchise, and I believe works with some other professional sports leagues, to give a unified contract to every single one of the players. And this is standard. This is how just about every other professional video game works, because EA recognizes we can't individually negotiate 10,000 deals.
Right.
We understand that not every athlete has the same marketability or same value, but it's impractical for us to do this independently. So everybody gets the same thing. Now, there's been some misinformation about that contract right now. It isn't out yet. No contract terms have been sent to any players. It's still those details are being worked out. What I had heard as a ballpark figure from some people in the licensing business, some folks that bid on this contract and didn't get it, was that the proposed terms are going to be, somewhere between $500 and $1,200 per player. We've seen the 500 number kind of thrown out there a little bit, which is obviously substantially less than Madden or other games. That all being said, I would be very, very surprised if there is a meaningful effort for athletes to refuse to sign on to the game because of the money. A couple of agents may be saying that right now, but when you actually talk to athletes, which I do on a pretty regular basis, and the schools are like, no, people would do it for free. Whether it's going to be $500, $800, $1,000, we don't really know. The other thing I would quickly add, though, is that one potential wrinkle is that athletes at the 3 service academies are not technically just students, they're federal employees because they're in the armed forces. And right now, those athletes are not allowed to sign NIL deals. That's a violation of the military terms of service. And so attorneys at Army, Navy, and Air Force are working with like the Pentagon and also EACLC to figure out if they can get their players in the game, and whether that means that they have to like defer compensation or do something different. The answer I've gotten so far from Navy and Air Force is we don't know yet. So I would say there's a possibility you won't see the names of those athletes, and because athletes have to opt in individually, and people just forget to do paperwork. I think we're not going to get all 13,000 or whatever it is, but the overwhelming majority I would expect to be in the game.
Gotcha. Okay, so that I had heard a lot of that. The end part right there about the armed forces schools I had not heard, which is I hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting. But I think even you just saying that, I think that kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, it gives a good reason to delay this game another year because there's clearly so many moving parts. And so I find that interesting, but
yeah,
it's
there's so many people. Like I think this is important for fans to realize, because you look at Madden or NBA 2K and you think, why can't you just do, how hard could this be? Right? The NFLPA, the Players Association for the guys in the NFL, like that represents less than 3,000 people, and you've only got 32 teams, and they're all centrally administered by one league.
Right.
We're looking at more than 12,000 athletes,
mm-hmm.
and all of the schools are kind of doing their own thing. Everything takes longer,
right?
Because of just the sheer scope of the entities involved. That's not true for any other pro game.
No, absolutely, yeah. There's clearly so many moving parts, so many teams, so many players. And so I think I even had kind of reported the $500 thing, and I hope I never put any just fake news out there. I always try to say, like, these are rumors. This isn't, necessarily true. But yeah, that's another thing I've heard, that so many players, I mean, I've seen players come out and say, I don't care if I'm getting paid $1 or 10 grand. Like I'll go in this game for free. And I think that's probably the sentiment of most players. So I would assume that, like you said, the majority of these players are going to be in the game. And so go ahead. Were you about to say something?
No, I was saying, yeah, that's right. Like,
okay.
There's with a group that large, yeah, there's probably going to be a couple of stragglers, but it would be a massive surprise if that was a big number.
Right. Absolutely. So next question I have would be, when will we hear anything official from EA? Any trailers, teasers, anything like that?
Yeah. I'm getting this question a lot right now. So what I can tell you, number one, is I think sometimes as consumers we forget that you typically don't get trailers or detailed gameplay information about sports games this far out in advance, right? I was checking this. I played the NBA 2K series a lot. We find out who the cover athlete is, maybe 3 or 4 months before launch, but you don't get gameplay trailers until like 2 weeks after the game comes out.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know we don't know anything about what the next NBA 2K is going to be like. The last one just came out. We don't know anything about the next baseball game or anything. I've talked to people at EA who wanted to share more during this season. I had heard there was some optimism over the summer that they might, share a couple of stills, around the first game or two of the season. Bring some players to their Florida campus and do some motion capture. That obviously didn't happen. I think the speculation that there may be something at the end of this season, maybe around the national championship game, maybe around the rivalry week or so Temple at the end of the year, I think that's a reasonable guess. I don't know for sure. I would not read into the fact that you're not hearing a whole lot officially as something to panic about, because that's how these games typically work. And EA already, I can tell you, is not thrilled that I have shared as much as I have. Like there's been more leaks about this than there have been for almost any other game that they do, because they're not typically working with public institutions.
Right.
They like to control the flow of the information much more than is already happening right now.
Right. No, that's I'll kind of ask a question later that maybe kind of ties into that. And so I think it's interesting, like you just said, that this game's getting leaked more than anything else. And I just read an article, actually, that kind of I guess made me feel a little bit better about this as well. Because I think I was reading, I can't remember exactly, but it was Madden, I think, that they were like, hey, it's normal, like you just said, for trailers and things to come out like less than a month before the game actually releases. So that should not be something to worry about, especially a game like this where it hasn't been released for over a decade once it does come out. And so I guess I wasn't going to originally ask this, but yeah, so it sounds like you're receiving pushback from EA for the stuff you're releasing.
I wouldn't say it's been like really aggressive or anything. And I haven't gotten like a direct, cease and desist or anything, but I know enough through the grapevine that I don't think I'm going to be on their Christmas card list.
There you go.
They would prefer that I wasn't sending out as many of these things. And also, candidly, I don't get quick responses from their official PR team. And I think everybody here knows that when I'm talking to people, it's not generally in the communications department. But that's the business. They have a job to do, and I have a job to do. That's
right.
fine.
Right.
It's not personal.
Absolutely. All right. I guess this is probably the last big question I have.
Yeah.
Do you, and it sounds like maybe you do, but do you know anything or have anything that cannot be released to the public yet?
Yes.
Okay. So
I'll say this, right? EA reached out to several experts in college athletics for consulting. But they typically reach out to some current and former coaches. And I know they reached out to a few other reporters. I was not one of these, but I know several of them that are, to talk about recruiting and NIL. And those individuals had to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, about what they talked about. I've had a couple of conversations. I haven't had to formally sign one of these, but in order to protect the people I'm talking with, I had to promise not to share it yet.
Gotcha.
What I have is like not crazy exciting.
Okay.
But there's a few things I can't share yet. Yeah.
Okay. I think just not being able to share is exciting in and of itself. But and then actually I did skip over one of my big questions, so I'll ask this before we move on to some of the smaller questions from the followers. But game modes. I know I've seen Road to Glory and Dynasty have been, I guess, confirmed. Do you know what game modes we're looking at for this game?
Yeah, so this is one of the things where you can't FOIA exactly, right? And EA is much more likely to talk to me about assets and about realism and licensing than they are about game modes. What I have been told is that there is that they view Dynasty mode as the flagship, most important mode of the game. They have tried to spend a lot of time updating that mode. Is there going to be an Ultimate Team mode? Like I was told that there will be. Is there going to be a Road to Glory mode? I was told that there will be. Other stuff, I don't know, right? Like we could speculate. It would surprise me if some other core gameplay functionality from previous games was removed. But will there be a mascot mode? I don't know. If I don't have the written receipt, I can't say for certain. I don't know exactly. Some of the deep specifics of Dynasty mode. But I know that those three will be in there. I understand that when everybody hears EA, and not unjustifiably, they immediately think microtransaction card collecting hell.
Right.
And I'm not saying that Ultimate Team is not going to be in the game. But from people that I have trust there, they're like, look, man, we have Twitter accounts too. We know what everybody says about this company, and we know that we are trying to make changes to Dynasty mode. We know that's the one that people really want to be playing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I got I don't know, but I got so many questions about Dynasty mode specifically. I try to throw out a lot of the questions that were super, super specific because I just assumed that information wouldn't really be available. But yeah, I got so many questions related to specifically the recruiting in Dynasty mode, asking how is that going to look? Is it going to be like Instantly 14? Is it going to be like the older ones where you make phone calls and visits to the recruits? So like I said,
I can tell you a little bit about that if you want. I can share what I know.
Absolutely.
Some of your questions.
Absolutely.
So what I can tell you is that it's not going to be exactly like a 2014. And one of the major focuses on the development team was realism and how can we modernize the recruiting process and roster management to what college football looks like right now. So, yes, the transfer portal will be in the game. NIL, in some capacity, will be in the game. The way that roster management works and recruiting, like signing limits, and the way that the recruits are contacted is going to be different than 2014 because the recruiting is different. The other thing that I've had multiple developers tell me, and this is kind of high level, so I wouldn't read too much into it, but one of the things that they want to focus on during the recruiting process is for players to feel connected and excited about the recruits that they're going to be playing with next year. And to create a feedback loop in recruiting that is providing constant rewards. So what that will mean for the scouting system, what that will mean for player fit, I can't say for certain. You can kind of read into that a little bit, knowing that 2014 was 2 video game systems ago. We have a lot more, computing processing power for tracking variables and making this more complicated than what we had. It's a very different world now. We'll kind of leave it at that.
Gotcha. Okay, so you I will say you know more than I guess about the specifics than I was anticipating. So maybe I underestimated you a little bit. So maybe I should have included some of these questions. But no, that's super interesting. And you bring up a good point because, like you said, I mean, the last time this game came out was PS3 and Xbox 360. Like you said, there's so much maybe more in depth we can do in this new game. So it's definitely something to look forward to. And you actually touched on a couple things that I'll kind of reiterate maybe. You said the transfer portal is going to be in the game to some extent?
Yes, that's what I've been told, yeah.
Okay.
Transferring was barely a thing in previous Dynasty modes. You might add 1 or 2 players or something. That is going to be a significant part of the off-season player, the player movement. That's what I've been told.
Okay, awesome. That's super exciting for a lot of people, especially me. I'm one of the guys that would go in, recruit, and sim my whole season. I enjoy playing, but something about the simulation is just super fun. And so if they add more of that, especially, because the transfer portal is basically just free agency of college football. And then when you combine that with NIL, which you also just touched on a tiny bit, that's going to be in the game as well.
In some capacity. So I can't say that it's going to be press X to drop 500,000 commitment and you're managing like a salary cap. I can't say that it's like that. I don't know if NIL is, as simple as one of the variables that fit your school profile that recruits will evaluate. It could be more in depth than that. I just know that it will exist.
Right.
And that was part of why they reached out to reporters and coaches to better understand what that looks like in the real world.
Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, I think the NIL might be a little bit tricky to put in the game once you start dealing with money and stuff in college athletics. But I think the combination of that and transfer portal is going to make Dynasty mode super fun. So maybe I'll try to include some of these more specific questions since it sounds like maybe you know more than I was anticipating, which is awesome. But let me hit some of these other ones that I saw people ask a lot. One I saw a ton was what platforms, if will this game release on?
Next generation video game consoles. If you don't have a PS5 or an Xbox One and this game is your priority, you've got 1 more year to get one.
Right. That's what I've been telling people. Once it got delayed, I was like, look, you got over a year, whatever, start saving your allowance or whatever money income you have and buy that new console.
Yeah, I don't actually know if it will be on PC or not. But it's not going to be on PS4. It's not going to be on the last generation of Xbox. It's not going to be on the Switch.
Okay, not on the Switch. I saw a few people asking about Nintendo.
Yeah.
Okay, so PS5 and Xbox Series X for sure. PC's up in the air. Everything else is basically off the table. That sound correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha. All right, let me go down the list here. Saw a lot of people asking about presentation. So ESPN, CBS, Fox, etc. And then going along with that, commentators in the game. Do you know anything about that?
I do. I'm trying to think of what I'm allowed to share.
Okay.
So what I can share is that, yes, ESPN has a special contract with EA for game presentation. And so College Game Day is a part of this game. I know that multiple people associated with College Game Day have already done voice recording for this, right? I know Kirk Herbstreit's done it. I know that Desmond Howard has done it. David Pollack did. We'll see if they keep that audio now that he's not with ESPN anymore.
Right.
And Reese Davis has as well. My understanding is that other less famous voices at ESPN have also provided some voice work. I don't know if they want to simulate. That might mean they're simulating a cut back to the studio for game updates, and they have somebody who's a different host provide some of those or cut-ins. I don't know. I just know that I've seen some of the voice acting list. Some of the stuff I can't share. Some of the stuff I can. Like those big names are part of it. My understanding is that Lee Corso has not done voice recording for this. I know Paul Feinbaum has not. We'll see if they end up adding anybody. I can't say for certain. I can't bet 1,000% here that Fox and CBS and NBC are not part of this. My assumption would be no. It's always been, for at least in my memory, it's always been an ESPN exclusive. The exception might be with Sports Illustrated or with a print partnership with a 247 or somebody else for recruiting updates. I can't verify that that's not in it, but I would expect an ESPN focused game presentation that will at least include very many familiar faces from game day.
Okay. I think that's better than a lot of people were thinking. I had a lot of questions about game day, so I was going to ask that. You kind of just hammered that. That's awesome. Commentators, happy to hear some of these big names. Okay, so another question. Definitely a lot of people asking this, especially I think relating to your work because the stuff you've been tweeting with a lot of the assets and different things. But they were asking how many different alternate uniforms for each team. Obviously, that's completely going to vary. Alabama doesn't have many alternates to begin with. But is there a limit? Is there going to be a certain amount? Do you know anything like that?
It's a good question. And I've gotten this a lot here too. Here's what I can say. The current uniforms, home, away, alternate 1, alternate 2, the current stuff is generally shared by the university, and I can generally FOIA it. Just today, I got a huge batch of stuff back from Bowling Green, so I shared some of the photo shoots that they had done. The historic uniforms, I'm told that data generally comes directly from Under Armour, Adidas, or Nike, and they have the exact file formats, and they have the data for pretty old historical uniforms too. So that I can't FOIA because Nike's a private company or Adidas is a private company, and so I can't compel them to share that information with me. I can ask politely, and I may be asking politely again. What I had been told is that they've been asking schools for a lot, right? And they've been communicating, we want to include lots of historic uniforms. Can I promise that will mean that we're going to see some 1906 no face mask leather helmet stuff? I mean, that'd be pretty funny. But I would say it's safe to expect there will be uniform options in this game that predate 2015, right? If there are people that have, what I expect some level of Ole Miss powder blues and a throwback that they like to bring in from the 50s and 60s. Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. Do I think it's pretty reasonable that there will be, whether it's DLC or at launch, the rainbow Hawaii uniforms and not the dark green that they typically wear? Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. But I don't have a hard number whether it's 30 or 40.
Right.
I would say it's safe to assume there's going to be multiple.
Awesome.
I do believe every school is being asked to submit multiple helmets.
Okay. Yeah. No, I saw the 3 Colorado helmets you posted. That got a lot of people excited. I literally just posted the Bowling Green stuff that you posted 5 minutes after, just because when I get any content, I get excited. Sure. And my followers.
I've got UTSA ones around here somewhere. I request so many documents, including for stuff that has nothing to do with this video game, that sometimes I have to go back and make sure that I filed them correctly, because you never know what people are going to be interested in or not. But yeah, if there's a school that only has home and away and no other alternates, I'm assuming they either just joined FBS that year or somebody screwed up.
Right.
That's not the standard.
Right. No, absolutely. Well, that goes along with this question. You mentioned historic uniforms. So Do you know anything about historic teams or players?
I don't know a ton that is like 1,000% concrete. What I can tell you about historic players is that their group licensing is done independently of anything you do with current athletes. Some, if they were in the NFL, there's a Legends group license that EA can purchase. And then there's going to be some that have to be negotiated individually. So I would be a little surprised if EA is going to commit to trying to buy the likeness for a ton of guys that are not part of the NFLPA, like or Legends or somebody that was a big time in college and then didn't do anything in the NFL or didn't participate. If you're going to have an Ultimate Team mode, which they are, I think you kind of have to have some legend likenesses. People are going to want to play with Tim Tebow in Ultimate Team.
Right.
People are going to want to play with Matt Leinart or with Legends. I don't know how far back they can go, and they haven't shared with me the scope of those, because that's also something that, because it's not directly contracted with the schools, wouldn't show up in records and isn't something I can make somebody tell me. Gotcha.
Good point. And I do think that question spurs a lot from the years we didn't have a game. People want to see, I don't know, Lamar Jackson or whoever in the game. So
yeah,
I get their interest there, but that is a good point.
I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, let's see here. Going along with that as well, do you know anything about face scans? And I'll preface that with, I guess it seems unlikely to have face scans of that many players, but have you heard anything about that?
I've heard that they're not going to try to face scan 13,000 people.
Right.
Right. So they're talking, depending on how quickly the licensing gets done, because they can't do anything until they know what the rosters are going to look like next year. Right. Like, let's use an example. The most famous guy in college football right now is Caleb Williams. Right. He's probably going to the NFL, and so he wouldn't be in the game next year, even if regardless of his licensing situation. So do you pay him to scan his face if there's a 90% chance he's not going to be in the game? Probably not. About Shadir Sanders, who knows, right? So you kind of have to wait to start some of that process. I've been told that there's interest in doing it for some people, like probably for people that are going to be around for more than one season, or that they can get a little bit more out of. But it's not practical to do it for everybody. So they're going to ask schools, hey, I need your roster, I need their biographical information, and I need multiple pictures of them so we can at least try to map it.
Gotcha. So, yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I haven't even really thought about that, honestly. A lot of these guys aren't even going to be in the game that are currently in college football. So, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking. Like, face scans for, like you said, 13,000 people or whatever is very unlikely. But maybe a little bit of maybe some players. We'll see. And then, gotcha. So, face scans, maybe we'll see. But I think you might have touched on it a little bit earlier. And also, I think we're over our 30-minute time, so let me know if you need to head out of here or anything.
Yeah.
But
I got another 20 minutes, I think, before I got something else. So
okay,
we're okay for now.
Okay. Head coaches, and I think maybe you touched on this a second ago, but do you know anything? I just thought of it now because of face scans. Do you know anything about head coaches being in the game?
So I'm trying to ask about that too. Historically, they weren't in the game, and it's a similar thing, right? Like their NIL, their likeness is independent of schools. It's independent of and there's no union, right? So you'd have to do it individually. I've also been told there's some reticence on the EA side. Same thing, like, how many of these dudes are going to get fired? Like, do you want to spend a bunch of money on somebody who's then going to get canned like 2 months into the season, which is a little bit different from like the NFL or the NBA? If I had to guess, I would say probably not, but I am working to confirm that. I've made phone calls and I've reached out to a couple of agents, and if I know something definitive, I'll share it. Okay,
cool. That sounds good. And again, you bring up good points that I think a lot of us, including myself, don't think about, because we're like the game could come out and we're like, what the heck? Why are there not real coaches in the game? That's such a big lost opportunity. But then from EA's perspective, they're like, why would we put that many coaches in the game when, like you just said, they might get fired a couple games into the year? So maybe for consumers and customers, just keep that in mind. A lot of these things aren't in the game for actual good reasons.
Yeah, and in fact, I'll kind of quickly, go off on that for a little bit because I think this is important for consumers to realize here too. EA, one, they're spending a ton of money to make this thing because I was told 0% of the code from the last college football game is usable. Like, you got to rebuild the whole damn thing. It's because you can't plug the 360 architecture into the Xbox One X for that development. So you have to do all of that, and then you're also spending a lot of money licensing all the players, and then the schools are not that expensive, but there's just a lot of them, right? The typical licensing fee to the university ranges between around 130,000 ish for the biggest names to the between 50 and 25K at the bottom. You spread that among all those players, all the teams, and then the other thing we haven't talked about, but I'm going to put this out there: EA is also trying to license some music, not just fight songs, but they're trying to license Enter Sandman for Virginia Tech. They're trying to license Jump Around for Wisconsin, and those things cost money. So when you're looking at all of that and you realize that as much as you and I are excited about this and your listeners, this is not FIFA. Right. This is not Madden. This is globally a niche video game property. So there are some things that EA is trying to decide here, like, is it worth us spending $500,000 or $1 million and time to license X, Y, or Z, whether that's a coach, whether that's an FCS stadium or an FCS fight song or these rosters, versus spending that time working on physics. And that's a tricky question. And for FIFA, because you're the best-selling video game in the world, it's a different calculation. But this game, even as being as all the momentum behind it and pent-up interest, I'm told it's not expected to sell more than 25% of what Madden does. So that way you can understand a little bit of conservatism as you're trying to figure out features.
Right.
Does that make sense?
No, that does make sense. And I think, like you said, I don't think people realize that because college football have such diehard fans. And I think they don't realize college football, despite it being huge, is not as big as the NFL. And the NFL, despite it being huge, like you said, it isn't as big as soccer, which is a global sport. So, no, that's definitely something good to keep in mind because I think we realize, or we don't realize that. And like you just said, we obviously want these smaller features that make it feel like college football. But if we get those smaller features and then the gameplay, like the physics sucks, then obviously we're going to be pissed about that. So there's got to be a good balance, and I think the previous games did that because of the people that were working on the game actually cared about the game, at least from what I've read. And so hopefully they can continue that here with the new game. This is the last question I have written down. I have a ton of questions floating in my head now. I know we're running out of time, but I'll ask this one real quick. And it kind of goes off what we were just talking about too. Difference for Madden, because I know it's going to be on the same engine that Madden is built on, but you could build a gazillion games on that engine. So what do you know comparing it to Madden?
Yeah, and this is something I know a lot of readers and a lot of you fans care very deeply about. What I can share with you that I know, is that one, the design leads, the project managers, the head architects of this game, I talked to some of them, are degenerate college football fans. I say this with love, they're sickos.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean the CEO of Electronic Arts is a college football sicko? Yeah, probably not. But the people that are in the blood and guts here, they care very deeply about the sport itself. And they also recognize, and this has been communicated to me too, that you can't just do a carbon copy of Madden, in part because the game of football is literally different between the two engines. So the last college football game, if you guys remember, the defining gameplay focus that they really tried to dig into that year was the option. And running a triple option or running a read option, which had become part of almost a standard college football playbook, and was that way for a lot of the last decade. wasn't very good until like the last year when you had the option to like specifically read this defensive end or read this linebacker and everything. And that's not in Madden. Like the Eagles will run a couple of those plays, or like the Dolphins might run a couple of them, but that's not a core gameplay mechanic. Well, since that last game, RPOs are now a defining core gameplay function for like 70% of college football offenses.
Right.
And that was barely a thing in the last game. It's not as much a thing in Madden. We still have teams, not many, but still have teams that are running stuff out of like the flex bone. We still have, a couple of teams, borrowing run and shoot principles, which means you have to have different blocking schemes and different plays and animate things differently than you do in the NFL. So I can tell you that those are things that developers are working on. I know that a lot of people see Madden Engine and freak out, and I can't promise you if the game's going to be perfect or even good. I wish I could. I can't. I tell everybody, look, man, I pre-ordered Mass Effect Andromeda. Like, I understand that sometimes EA makes things that suck.
Right.
And I understand the frustration with Madden. The biggest takeaway I can impress on everybody is I believe in my heart that this is not a carbon copy Madden reskin. There is too much development work happening behind the scenes. It is the number one reason they delayed this game. And the people who are working on this game and managing and selling this game also understand you only get one chance to make a good first impression. So this game, it could suck. If you haven't played it, can't promise you it's going to be good. If it sucks, it's going to suck on its own merits. Not because it sucks for the exact same reason that Madden sucks.
Okay. Well, that's good. Obviously I don't want it to suck, but if it does suck, hopefully it sucks because it sucks and not because it's Madden. So
that's what I'm telling people. And I know people are going to hear that and be like, yeah, whatever. That's just what EA's telling them. It's like, I could be wrong, but like this is what I can communicate as a reporter, not just as somebody who is mad that the latest hockey game is bad.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. Do we have time for one more?
We got time for a couple more. I got a few more minutes.
Okay.
And there's one other thing I wanted to share anyway, but let me get your question real quick.
Okay, perfect. This is my last question, and then I'll open it to you to say whatever you want. Team builder / just customization in general.
I wish I knew, man.
Okay.
That is the number one thing that interests me as a person. And the honest to God answer is I don't know.
Okay.
I know that there are some concerns about people using Team Builder to get around licensing contracts, and they have like some IP stuff they got to worry about. They also know it's been requested a ton. I don't know for certain.
Okay.
I wish I did.
Okay. No, that's kind of what I've been hearing too, was that just based on how NCAA 14 and that whole series ended, they're weary of adding customization like that into the game because, like you just said, they could get around all the legality of the team of the game. So I get it, but hopefully we can always hope. So maybe at least to create a team or something. So that is all. That rounds up all my questions. I try to hit on a bunch of different stuff. You did awesome. I appreciate it. But I know you just said you have something you wanted to mention, and I was going to ask anyways. Do you just have anything you want to share that you want people to know about this game?
Yeah. So the one other thing that I've written about a couple of times, but in case this is your first time hearing from me, I have filed a ton of these requests over the last year to understand what else schools are giving EA. The full list of things that I have seen are, one, everybody, except for the people that play in NFL stadiums, is getting a completely brand new 3D rendered version of their stadium. And they are asking schools, like, could you send me like 3,000 photos from every possible angle of the stadium? Because we want to get the dorm in the background. We want to know what you've got in the locker room. We want to have tracking shots. They're also asking for a ton of photos of mascots, of fans, of historic, tracking shots and everything around each particular school. So like at the Bowling Green dump here, they sent me some stuff from like the 40s. Who knows how that's going to get incorporated in the game? They asked for it. And they've also asked for, I think, an uncommon amount of detail about the game day presentation itself. So they don't want this. Like, I don't just want your fight songs. I also want what you play in pregame. I want the sound effects you play on third down. I want the chants that your students are chanting, so long as it doesn't have the F word in it. I want to know when they do it. I want to know like all of those things, including the stuff that you don't have licenses for, because we have a budget to kind of try to chase some of those things down. So that has been part of it. I've been sharing a lot of that information. The other thing that I don't think has gotten a lot of like play that I can confirm is a focus on rivalry games. So this EA has also asked, hey, tell me who your rivals are. Give me the images of the trophies. Tell me who's sponsoring them. Give me some special images around those games, the names and everything, because we want to highlight that those are different events. We want our game presentation to rectify that. So it's also kind of fun to see, who everybody considers a rival, because like EA is also like, I understand that, we have to adjust that from 2014. Maybe we don't consider LSU and Tulane rivals anymore, and we want to incorporate LSU Ole Miss or LSU Alabama a little bit more. So all of that is in the game. I'm sharing that information as much as I can, and then also say the reason I paywall a fair amount of this stuff is not because I'm greedy, but one, I do have to make a living, and two, a lot of this information costs me money to get. I just wrote a check for $109 today to go pay for your processing fees to get this information from Kennesaw. So if you want me to keep spending the time and the effort to try to get as exhaustive amount of information as possible, I would appreciate your support. You can find all of my coverage at extrapointsmb.com.
Perfect. I was going to give you a little second here to plug your stuff anyways, because I think it's valuable and important. And I hope nobody listening thinks you're greedy. Like you said, you have to make a living, and then also this stuff costs money to get, and we are appreciating your work and what you're doing. But I also appreciate your time talking to me today. This was awesome. I just gained a ton of knowledge about this game that I'm excited to share already. But no, yeah, definitely appreciate your time, and I would love to do it again. Once you get more information, I would love to talk to you again and continue putting this information out there.
Okay, that sounds great, my friend. Let me know when it comes out. I'll share it on Twitter and share it in the newsletter, and I'll be happy to do that. Hopefully I get some more soon.
Perfect. Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Matt, for talking to us. You can check out his stuff on Twitter. What was it, Matt Brown?
Matt Brown EP on Twitter, and extrapointsmb.com is where you can find the newsletter. Right? I've got a whole bunch of stuff besides just this video game.
Awesome. Yeah, exactly. I just I've been on there for a while, but I think with this email, I don't know. I'm on there now, but I've been reading recently, so it's been awesome. But thanks for your time, and hopefully talk to you soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Talk to you later.